In the heart of Enugu City, where the hills kissed the clouds and the streets glittered with both dreams and dust, a sleek black Lexus stopped beside the morning traffic. Outside stands Amora Obadike, the only daughter of Chief Obadike, one of the richest construction magnates in the entire southeast. Amora was beauty wrapped in privilege, light caramel skin that glowed without effort, perfectly braided hair that never felt the heat of the sun, and nails too polished to ever touch anything rough. She had everything money could buy, except humility. That morning, she was on her way to a friend's birthday brunch at a fancy hotel when her car gave a soft cough, then another, and died right in the middle of Hilltop Road, a sloped street that curved toward the old mechanic workshops of Coal Camp. She frowned and tapped the dashboard. "Not now," she muttered, glancing at her gold-plated watch. Cars behind her began to honk impatiently. "Enugu drivers," she hissed, stepping out into the sun with irritation written all over her face. The heat licked her skin. Dust rose from the road. Her perfume battled with the smell of engine oil that floated from nearby workshops. She felt completely out of place. From across the street, a young man lifted his head from under a rusty car bonnet. His shirt was stained with oil, his face darkened by sweat, but his eyes, bright, focused, curious, watched her like someone seeing a painting come alive. That was Abuka, a 23-year-old apprentice mechanic working under Master Keen, the notorious workshop owner whose voice was louder than his conscience. Abuka wiped his hands on a rag and approached her cautiously. "Good morning, madam. Looks like your car's radiator overheated." Amora turned sharply, frowning. "Do I look like someone who needs a roadside mechanic?" she snapped. Her voice carried pride, but behind it was worry. Abuka smiled softly. "Sorry, madam. I didn't mean offense. But your car is steaming. If you try to start it again, you may spoil the engine." She folded her arms. "And what do you know about cars?" Abuka pointed gently toward the leaking radiator hose. "See there? That crack. It's small, but dangerous. Let it cool. I can patch it for you to reach wherever you're going." Amora's eyes followed his finger, then looked away, pretending not to care. "Fine. Do whatever you think. But be fast." He nodded, removed his ragged shirt to reveal a lean, muscular frame, and got to work. She watched him quietly, the way his hands moved carefully, how focused he was, how he never once looked up at her. It felt strange. Her phone rang. It was her friend, Nkechi Amora. "Where are you? Everyone's waiting. My stupid car broke down near Coal Camp. Can you imagine? Ooh, that place? Be careful, oh. Those boys there can steal your tires while you're watching." Amora laughed nervously. "Please, I'm not even talking to any of them. Just waiting for one dirty boy to finish." Abuka heard that. He said nothing, but his hands trembled slightly as he tightened a bolt. Minutes later, he closed the bonnet. "All done, madam. You can start the engine." She turned the key. The car purred back to life. Relief flooded her face, but she quickly replaced it with a cold expression. "How much?" she asked. Abuka shook his head. "No payment, madam. I just helped." She raised a brow. "Don't be ridiculous. Everyone here wants something." He smiled faintly. "Not me. I'm still learning work. My master will collect any money I take. Just help me with a prayer instead." For a moment, something in her heart softened. But she covered it quickly with sarcasm. "I'll pray you get a real job one day." She rolled up her window and drove off. Later that afternoon, back at the workshop, Master Keen slapped Abuka's shoulder. "Idiot boy. You fixed a rich woman's car and didn't collect money? Do you think prayers will buy spare parts?" Abuka rubbed his shoulder. She didn't look like someone who wanted to pay. "I just wanted to help." "Help?" Keen sneered. "Next time, help me by bringing money. You think good name feeds man?" The other apprentices laughed. But Ibuka just smiled faintly and went back to work. Deep inside, he couldn't stop replaying that moment. The brief eye contact, the tone in her voice, the arrogance that somehow fascinated him. The next day, Amora sat in her room scrolling through her phone. She couldn't explain why her thoughts wandered back to that mechanic boy. There was something calm in his eyes, something honest. But she shook the thought away. Her father entered without knocking. Amora, I hear your car broke down yesterday near coal camp. Why didn't you call me? She sighed. Daddy, it wasn't that serious. It's serious when my daughter is stranded near mechanics and touts. That place is for low lives. You could have been robbed. She rolled her eyes. You always exaggerate. Chief Obadiah's voice deepened. Don't argue with me, young lady. Stay away from such places and the people there. Understand? Yes, Daddy. He stared at her for a long second, suspicion lingering in his gaze, then walked out. The following week, fate decided to play again. Amora's car broke down, at the exact same spot. This time, smoke rose thickly from under the bonnet. She sighed, frustrated, looking around helplessly. And then, from behind a parked bus, Ibuka appeared again, holding his spanner like a soldier returning to duty. He smiled shyly. We meet again, madam. Amora laughed despite herself. You again? Are you haunting my car? He shrugged. Maybe your car likes me. That unexpected humor made her laugh properly for the first time that day. She stepped aside and let him work. As he bent over the engine, she noticed a small scar on his wrist. What happened there? He wiped his hand. Got burnt last month. My master said it will remind me to be careful. I think it just reminds me I'm human. There was wisdom in his tone that surprised her. For someone with dirty hands, his words felt clean. When he finished, she reached into her bag and handed him a crisp note. Take it. You've earned it this time. He hesitated, then accepted it quietly. Thank you, madam. Before she entered her car, she said softly, You can call me Amora. Ibuka blinked, confused. Madam Amora? She smiled. Just Amora. He nodded awkwardly, and she drove off, leaving behind the smell of her perfume mixed with burnt oil, a strange combination of two different worlds. That evening, under the dim light of the workshop, Master Keen leaned close to Ibuka. So, she gave you money today, eh? Ibuka nodded. Keen's eyes narrowed. Don't get ideas. Girls like that, they'll smile today and destroy your life tomorrow. Keep your eyes on your work. Ibuka just said, Yes, sir, but his mind was already elsewhere. He could still hear her voice, soft and amused, just Amora. As for Amora, that night she sat by her bedroom window overlooking the glowing lights of Enugu Hills. She whispered to herself, Ibuka, mechanic boy, and for the first time, her heart felt something new, curiosity. Little did she know, curiosity was how love begins, and sometimes how trouble starts. The city of Enugu wore a golden glow that Saturday morning. Expensive cars hummed along the expressway, perfume mixed with exhaust smoke, and laughter echoed from cafes where the rich spent their weekends pretending life had no edges. Inside one of those cafes sat Amora Obadiah, her long braids resting neatly on her shoulder, her manicured fingers wrapped around an iced glass. Her two closest friends, Nkechi and Chisholm, sat across from her, both girls dressed in designer clothes that screamed comfort born from privilege. So, Nkechi said with a teasing smile, Tell us again, how did you end up in coal camp of all places? Amora rolled her eyes. I told you, my car broke down. Twice. Chisholm leaned forward. Twice? Girl, that's not a coincidence. Maybe the universe is trying to humble you. They laughed loudly. Amora forced a smile, but inside, she felt something she couldn't name. She remembered the mechanic's calm eyes, his careful voice, the way he refused her money the first time. Something about him had stayed with her, like a song stuck in her head. Nkechi nudged her arm. "Don't tell me you're thinking about that boy." Amora blinked. "Which boy?" "The mechanic. You keep zoning out like a Nollywood heroine." Chisholm giggled. "Ah, Amora, the princess of Independence Layout, thinking about a Grease boy? Wonders shall never end." Their laughter drew eyes from other tables. Amora tried to laugh too, but it came out hollow. "You people have no sense," she said, sipping her drink. "It's not that deep." But it was. Because while her friends teased her, Abuka was miles away under a half-dead Peugeot, his face streaked with sweat and oil, humming quietly to himself. He didn't know why, but each time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, the proud tilt of her chin, the softness she hid behind arrogance. He didn't know it yet, but she had already taken a small piece of his peace. That afternoon, the sun rose high, merciless and bright. The workshop was a furnace of noise, engines roaring, metal clanging, men shouting over each other. Abuka worked silently as always, focused and patient. Master Keen, his boss, stood by the gate smoking a cheap cigarette, his belly round, his temper short. He called out, "Abuka." "Yes, sir." "You think I didn't see you with that fine girl the other day? The one with long braids and shiny nails? You're playing with fire, my boy." Abuka paused. "She's just a customer, sir." Keen spat to the ground. "Customer my foot. You don't know girls like that. They smile at you like angels, then turn your life into bad dream." He jabbed a greasy finger at him. "Focus on your work. Leave rich people alone. They belong up there," he pointed to the sky. "And you, my friend, are here," he pointed to the dirt. Abuka said nothing. But as he turned back to his tools, something inside him refused to accept that invisible line between heaven and dust. The next week, Amora's father held one of his business dinners at their mansion, a gathering of Enugu's elite. The compound glittered with chandeliers and laughter. Chief Obadike was a man whose voice commanded rooms and whose handshake could build or destroy futures. During dinner, he leaned toward his daughter. "Amora," he said, "have you met Barrister Chika's son, Nonso?" Amora looked up. Nonso smiled from across the table. Tall, polished, confident, the kind of man her father approved of. "Yes, Daddy," she said politely. "He's opening a tech company in Abuja next month. Brilliant boy. You two should talk." Amora nodded out of respect, but her heart wasn't in it. Later that night, while everyone danced, she slipped out into the backyard for air. She stood near the garden lights, staring at the night sky that stretched above Enugu's hills. Somewhere out there, she thought, someone was still awake, probably fixing a broken car with nothing but his bare hands and a stubborn dream. The next morning, she did something she'd never done before. She drove her car deliberately toward coal camp. When she stopped in front of the workshop, heads turned. No rich girl ever came there twice, at least not willingly. Abuka was bent over a generator, working quietly. When he heard her voice, he froze. "Need help again?" he asked, smiling faintly. She laughed. "No. I just came to check if the car's fine after your repair." He looked puzzled. "You drove all the way here to check?" Amora avoided his gaze. "Don't flatter yourself." He chuckled softly and went back to his work. "Then sit. Shade is better on that side." She sat under a wooden shed, her designer bag resting awkwardly on the rough bench. She watched him work, the rhythm, the calmness, the small smile that appeared each time he solved a problem. "Why do you work here?" she asked suddenly. He wiped his hands. "Because I love cars." "You could do better than this," she said, glancing around. "This place smells like burnt dreams." Abuka laughed. Every dream smells like smoke before it shines, Amora. The words hit her like poetry. Before she could reply, a loud voice thundered from behind, Amora! Her heart sank. She turned. It was her father's driver, sent to fetch her. Madam, your father said I should bring you home immediately, he said firmly. All the mechanics paused, staring. Abuka's chest tightened. He looked down, pretending to clean his tools. As the driver escorted her away, Master Keen whispered to Abuka, You see? That's the difference between your world and hers. She has drivers, you have grease. Don't mix them. Abuka didn't answer. He just stared at the road where her car disappeared. That evening, the storm came, heavy and wild. Rain pounded the roofs, lightning flashed across the hills. At the Obadike mansion, Amora argued with her father. You embarrassed me today. Chief Obadike shouted, pacing the living room. You sent your driver after me like a child, she fired back. I warned you to stay away from that place. From those people. Amora's voice trembled. Those people have names, Daddy. They have hearts. He slammed his hand on the table. A heart doesn't build legacy. A man covered in oil will never fit beside my daughter. Her eyes glistened. And what if he's different? Then he should prove it, the chief said coldly, but not with my daughter as experiment. He walked out, leaving her shaking with anger and pain. Outside, thunder rolled. Amora stood by her window, tears mixing with the reflection of lightning. She whispered to herself, maybe love isn't about fitting. Maybe it's about finding. Meanwhile, at the workshop, the rain had soaked everything. The power was out, and the other workers had gone home. But Abuka stayed behind, repairing an engine by flashlight. He worked quietly, lost in thought, until his master approached from behind. Keen dropped a wet rag beside him. You're still here? For what? Abuka shrugged. Engines don't rest because it rains. Keen smirked. Or maybe you're waiting for your princess again, eh? Don't fool yourself, boy. She's a visitor in your story, not a chapter. Abuka said nothing, but deep inside, he whispered, we'll see. The next morning, when the rain stopped, a small car pulled up near the workshop. It wasn't Amora's usual black Lexus. It was a modest Toyota with tinted glass. Abuka looked up from under a bonnet and froze. The door opened. Amora stepped out wearing a simple dress, no jewelry, no makeup, just her. The whole workshop went silent, even Master Keen paused mid-shout. Amora walked straight to Abuka. I came to apologize, she said softly. For what? He asked. For letting my father embarrass you yesterday. He shook his head. You don't owe me that. But she insisted. I do. For a long moment, they just stood there, two worlds, two hearts, one secret bridge forming between them. Then Abuka smiled. You shouldn't be here. People will talk. She smiled back. Let them. And as she turned to leave, her father's car came speeding down the road, the tinted windows sliding down slowly to reveal Chief Obadike's furious face. The air went still. The sky over Enugu City darkened early that day. Heavy clouds gathered like witnesses waiting for a fight between heaven and earth. By evening, the streets smelled of rain, dust, and secrets. Inside the grand Obadike mansion, Chief Obadike stood by the glass window, watching the wind whip through the palm trees. His jaw tightened. His driver had reported everything, how Amora had gone to coal camp, how she stood beside that mechanic boy like she'd forgotten who she was. He turned to his daughter, who stood a few feet away, her chin raised but her eyes glistening. You have embarrassed this family, he said coldly. Because I spoke to someone who isn't rich, she shot back. Because you've brought shame into my house. Daddy, he didn't do anything wrong. Her voice broke, but she held her ground. Chief Obadike paced, his expensive slippers tapping on the marble floor. You think love is a fairy tale, Amora? You think that boy will give you the life I've built? A mechanic's hands can only fix engines, not a future. Amora's lips trembled, but she whispered, maybe a future doesn't need gold to shine. Her father stopped and looked at her with something between anger and disbelief. You sound just like your mother, he said finally, his voice softer now, but wounded. Amora frowned. Then maybe you should ask why she left you. The words cut deep. Chief Obadiah froze. For a moment, silence filled the mansion, heavy and sharp. Then he turned away and muttered, if you walk down that road again, I will destroy that boy's life before your next breath. Amora's eyes widened. You wouldn't. I will, he said. And I can. The thunder cracked outside. That same evening, in a far humbler corner of the city, a booker worked quietly in the dim workshop, unaware that a storm far bigger than the one in the sky was already forming around his name. Master Keen barked orders from the back, his temper worse than usual. He had overheard whispers that a certain rich man's daughter had been seen talking to his apprentice. It irritated him beyond words. He had always seen a booker as a threat, too smart, too clean-hearted, too promising for a place like this. Keen liked being the biggest fish in his dirty pond. A booker, he shouted. You think you're a celebrity now because fine girls come here to smile at you? You think you're better than your master? A booker wiped sweat from his brow. No, sir. Then stop working like you own this place. Keen snapped, flinging a wrench that clattered across the floor. The other apprentices looked away, pretending not to see. But they saw the jealousy, sharp and ugly, growing in their master's eyes. Later that night, the rain came, wild and relentless. Thunder growled over the city as lightning painted the skyline white. Amora sat in her room, restless. Her phone glowed in her hand. Her father had forbidden her from leaving the house, but her heart didn't listen to rules. She typed quickly. I hope you're okay. It's raining so hard. Please reply. Minutes passed. Then her phone buzzed. Abuka, I'm fine. Still at work. Trying to finish something before the power goes out. She smiled faintly, imagining him under that tin roof, his shirt soaked, his hands steady even as the storm raged. She typed again. Do you ever rest? Abuka, engines don't sleep. Maybe that's why I love them. You're strange. So are you. She laughed softly, forgetting where she was until her door opened. Suddenly her father stood there. Amora froze. He looked at the phone in her hand and said quietly, Who are you talking to? She swallowed hard. A friend. His eyes darkened. That mechanic. She didn't answer. He snatched the phone, read the messages, and his silence grew more dangerous than shouting. Then he whispered, You want to see what happens when a poor boy touches what he shouldn't. He left the room, phone in hand. The next morning, before dawn broke, two men in plain clothes walked into the workshop. They didn't smile. They didn't introduce themselves. They walked straight to Abuka, who was setting up his tools. You are Abuka, right? One asked. Yes. You're under arrest. The world seemed to stop. What? For what? Abuka stammered. One of the men held up a document. For stealing spare parts from Chief Obadiah's company fleet. The chief filed a complaint himself. The workshop went dead silent. Master Keen blinked, then smirked, a cruel, satisfied smirk. Abuka, I warned you. I told you this. Your fine boy humility will bring trouble. Abuka looked around helplessly. Sir, you know I didn't, but Keen just shrugged. Police don't arrest innocent people for fun. The men dragged Abuka away as rain began to drizzle again. His tools fell to the ground, small metallic echoes of betrayal. At the mansion, Amora rushed down the stairs when she saw the police car leaving through their gate. Daddy! What did you do? She cried. Her father didn't look at her. He just said, I warned you. Now you'll see who he really is. She trembled. No. You framed him. He turned sharply. Enough. He will spend a few days learning where his limits are. Then maybe he'll go back to fixing real cars, not fantasies. Amora's tears fell freely. You don't understand. You're destroying someone who did nothing wrong. But he had already walked away. In a small police cell, Abuka sat on a cold bench, his mind spinning. He had never been inside a station before. His hands were bruised from struggling, his heart heavier than the chains around his wrists. He thought of his mother, sick and waiting for him. He thought of the workshop, the unfinished engine. But mostly, he thought of her, Amora. He whispered her name softly like a prayer swallowed by rain. 2 days passed, the rain refused to stop. Then, on the third night, when the streets of Enugu glistened with puddles and power lines flickered like ghosts, a car stopped in front of the police station. Amora stepped out, wrapped in a dark coat, her hair tied simply. She had come alone. She walked to the counter, her voice trembling but steady. I want to see the boy you arrested. Abuka. The officer glanced at her, then at her clothes. And you are? Someone who knows the truth, she said quietly. He hesitated, then waved her through. Inside the dim corridor, Amora saw him. Abuka sat by the wall, head bowed, his face tired but calm. When he looked up and saw her, surprise flashed across his eyes, then pain. Why are you here? He asked softly. To get you out, she said, but he shook his head. Don't. It'll only make it worse. Your father, I don't care, she cut in. I'll fix this. He smiled faintly. You can't fix what power breaks, Amora. She took his hand through the bars. Then I'll try anyway. Their fingers touched, oil-stained skin against soft palms, two worlds meeting quietly in a place where pride had no meaning. That night, she went home and stormed into her father's study. Release him, she said, trembling. Her father looked up from his files. Go to your room. Not until you release him. He stood up slowly. You think defiance makes you strong. No, she said, but love does. The chief stared at her in disbelief. Then, without a word, he reached for his phone and made a call. Release the boy, he said simply, then hung up. Thank you, Amora whispered, but he replied coldly, you'll regret this. When Abuka stepped out of the police gate the next morning, the sky was clear for the first time in days. Amora was waiting in her car, parked quietly across the road. He walked toward her, slow and uncertain. She smiled through tears. I told you I'd fix it. He looked at her for a long time, then said softly, why? Because you're not what they think you are. He exhaled. And you're not what I thought you were either. For a moment, neither spoke. The city hummed around them, taxis honking, traders shouting, but in that small silence, something changed. Something deeper than love, something closer to destiny. She reached out a hand. Let's leave this place. He hesitated. To where? Anywhere but here. He took her hand. Then let's see where broken cars and broken hearts can go. They drove off slowly, their reflections fading into the sunlight. The sun had barely risen over Enugu city, yet the air was already heavy, not with rain this time, but with the quiet tension that follows forbidden acts. Amora and Abuka drove through the narrow roads that led away from the city center. The morning breeze slipped through the half-open car window, carrying the scent of red dust and roasted corn. Neither of them spoke much. For the first time, Amora wasn't sure where she belonged, between the world of marble floors and chandeliers, and this rough, noisy heartbeat of Enugu she'd only seen through tinted glass. Abuka finally broke the silence. You shouldn't have come for me, Amora. Your father will never forgive this. She looked out the window. Then let him hate me. He's hated everything that doesn't obey him. Abuka smiled faintly. You talk like a soldier. She laughed weakly. Then maybe love is a battlefield. The car stopped in front of a small compound hidden behind rusted gates and flowering bushes. A cracked sign leaned against the wall, God's Mercy Workshop and Welding. This is where I stay, Abuka said quietly. Amora stepped out slowly. The ground was uneven, red mud mixing with patches of grass. Chickens clucked in a corner. In front of a single-room building sat an elderly woman wrapped in a faded wrapper, coughing softly into a handkerchief. Mama, Abuka called gently. The woman looked up. Despite her frail body, her eyes glowed with warmth. My son, she said, smiling weakly. You came early today. Abuka knelt beside her and touched her feet respectfully. I brought someone, he said. Amora stepped forward uncertainly, her designer shoes sinking into the soft ground. Mama, this is Amora. The woman's gaze swept over the girl, from her neatly pressed clothes to her nervous smile. So this is the one that keeps my son's eyes in the clouds, she said softly. Amora blushed. Good morning, Ma. You're welcome, my daughter, Mama said kindly. Please, sit. This house may be small, but the heart inside it is big. Inside, the room was tidy but humble, old photographs on the wall, a table with worn edges, a small bed covered neatly. Amora looked around quietly, her eyes softening. She had never been inside such a simple home before, and yet, for reasons she couldn't explain, she felt safe there. As Mema stepped outside to warm some water, Amora turned to Abuka. She's lovely, she whispered. She raised me alone, he said proudly. I promised her one day she'll rest. You will keep that promise, Amora said, smiling. You have the hands of a builder. He looked at her, surprised. And you, he said softly, you have the heart of someone who's learning to see. Their eyes locked, and for a second, silence carried more meaning than words ever could. But outside that little house, trouble was already spreading like fire through dry grass. Back at the Obadike mansion, Chief Obadike was livid. His driver had returned with news. Amora was seen entering the house of the mechanic boy. The chief's hand slammed against the table. She went to his house. Yes, sir. With who? Alone, sir. He exhaled sharply, his face darkening. Get my men. If she wants to see how low she can fall, I'll show her the ground myself. Back in the small compound, Amora sat beside Mama as she sipped tea. The old woman smiled. My son told me you helped him when trouble came. I prayed for you that night. Heaven hears simple people faster than powerful ones, you know. Amora smiled faintly. Then please pray that your son stops worrying too much. Mema chuckled. He gets that from me. Worry is our family's second name. Abuka returned from the workshop with a piece of old fabric and handed it to Amora. Your hands are too soft for this place. Here. She took it, confused. What's this for? To wipe the seat before you sit next time, he teased. She laughed, her laughter light and genuine. But just then, a deep horn echoed outside. A black SUV screeched to a stop in front of the compound. 4 men stepped out, dressed in dark suits. Abuka froze. What? Before he could finish, Chief Obadike emerged from the car, his white agbada swaying like an angry storm. Amora stood up instantly. Daddy! His voice boomed. Get inside that car this minute. No, she said firmly. He turned to Abuka, his face like thunder. So this is where my daughter has been hiding? In this pigsty? Abuka's jaw clenched, but he kept his tone respectful. Good afternoon, sir. Don't sir me, the chief barked. You dare touch my blood with your filthy hands? Mama coughed weakly from her seat. Please, my son meant no harm, Obadike snapped. Keep quiet, old woman. That moment shattered something in Amora. She stepped in front of Abuka and said, trembling, "Don't talk to her like that." Her father's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're defending him? Against me?" "Yes," she shouted. "Because he's worth more than all your money, Daddy." The chief's hand twitched, then he raised it and struck her across the face. The sound echoed through the small compound. Abuka's body tensed, his eyes darkened, but he held himself back. "Sir, please, stay out of this." Obadiah roared. He grabbed Amora's wrist and dragged her toward the car. She resisted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Daddy, please, enough." Before getting in, the chief turned to Abuka. "If I ever see you near my daughter again, I will bury your life under your own workshop. You will never work in this city again." He entered the SUV and drove off, leaving dust, silence, and heartbreak behind. 4 minutes, Abuka stood frozen, staring at the empty road. Then he turned to see his mother still coughing weakly. He whispered, rushing to her side. She smiled sadly. "Love always brings pain before peace, my son. Don't let this pain turn your heart bitter." But Abuka couldn't answer. His fists clenched, his chest heavy. He didn't know what hurt more, the slap that fell on her cheek, or the feeling that fate had already chosen sides. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Amora locked herself in her room. Her cheek burned, but her heart burned more. Her father's voice echoed in her head, "He will never fit beside you." She looked into the mirror, at her swollen eyes, her trembling lips. She whispered, "Maybe love isn't about fitting, maybe it's about breaking until something new fits better." Days passed in silence. Abuka returned to work, pretending to forget her, but every sound of a Lexus engine made him look up. Amora, meanwhile, refused meals, refused conversation, and refused to smile. One night, she sat by her window and saw the moon hanging low above the hills. She whispered into the dark, "I'll find you again, Abuka. No matter what it costs." And as if the night heard her, a gust of wind rattled her curtains, soft but sure, like destiny whispering back, "You will." The Hamatan wind had returned to Enugu, brushing the city with cold dust and dry whispers, but inside the small workshop at Coal Camp, the air was heavier than ever, thick with tension, rumor, and jealousy. Abuka had become both admired and envied since word spread that the Obadiah girl once came to see him. Some mechanics called him Fine Boy Mechanic, others called him Love Doctor. But behind the laughter was bitterness, and Master Keen fed on it like fire on oil. He never forgave Abuka for the attention he brought, and when Chief Obadiah's car rolled up to the workshop one Thursday morning, Keen saw his chance. The chief stepped out slowly, dressed in crisp white, his bodyguards following close behind. The noise in the workshop died instantly. Abuka froze at the sight. "Good morning, sir." Chief Obadiah's cold eyes scanned the place. "You're Abuka, yes?" "Yes, sir." "Good," the chief said calmly. "You're fired." Silence. Abuka blinked, confused. "Sir." "I've spoken to your master," the chief continued. "From today, you will never touch a car that belongs to my company or anyone connected to me. I have influence in this city, boy. Use your hands elsewhere." Abuka's chest tightened. "Sir, with all due respect, I've done nothing wrong." The chief's voice sharpened. "Your first mistake was thinking you could climb into a house where your shadow does not belong." He turned to Keen. "Make sure this one never sets foot here again." Keen bowed quickly. "Yes, sir. Consider it done." And just like that, Chief Obadiah walked out, leaving the sound of his authority echoing through the tin roofs. After the black SUV disappeared, Keen turned to Abuka with a grin that stung more than a slap. "You heard the man. Pack your things." Abuka stood still. "I've worked here since I was 16. "And now you're done," Keen said coldly. "Rich men's words are laws. You made your bed with your pride, now lie in the mud." He threw a rag toward Abuka. Wipe your tools and go before I help you with a kick. The other apprentices watched in silence as Abuka packed his few tools into an old bag, and no one spoke. No one dared. When he stepped out of the workshop gate, he didn't look back, not because he wasn't hurting, but because he didn't want anyone to see the tears burning behind his eyes. That evening, Amora sat in her father's study, her hands trembling as she watched him sign papers. "Daddy, please," she whispered, but he didn't look up. "Please what?" "You've taken everything from him." "Why?" He finally raised his eyes. "Because he took something from me first, your respect." "Respect?" she said bitterly. "You're confusing fear with respect, Daddy." His eyes hardened. "Enough. You will not destroy this family with some mechanic's foolish dream." He pushed a photo across the desk toward her. It was of Nonso, Barrister Chika's son, smiling, confident, holding flowers. "I have spoken to his father," the chief said. "You will marry Nonso before the end of the year." Amora froze. "What?" "It's decided." "No, Daddy. You can't. I can, and I will." Tears filled her eyes. "You don't want me happy." "I want you wise," he said coldly. "And love doesn't make people wise, it makes them foolish." He stood up and walked past her, leaving the picture on the table like a commandment written in gold. Days turned into weeks. Abuka searched for work everywhere, from New Haven to Abakpa, but every garage turned him away. Some did it politely, some mocked him. "You're the one who crossed Obadiah's daughter, ABI? My brother, go learn tailoring." He returned home each night with empty hands and tired eyes. His mother's health worsened. The medicine he used to buy became too expensive. One night, she coughed so hard she nearly fainted. Abuka rushed to her side, holding her shoulders. "Mama, please, hold on. I'll find a way. I'll fix this." She smiled faintly. "My son, you can fix cars, but you cannot fix destiny." He shook his head. "I'll prove you wrong." One afternoon, while he walked through Ogbeat Market, he saw Amora from afar, standing beside her father's car. She looked different, her face pale, her eyes tired, her beauty weighed down by sadness. Their eyes met briefly across the crowd. She made a small move toward him, but her father's bodyguard stepped between them. Chief Obadiah's voice boomed from inside the car, "Drive!" The car pulled away, leaving behind a trail of dust and heartbreak. Abuka stood frozen, his fists clenched. The market noise faded behind him. For the first time, he whispered out loud, "Maybe she was never meant to stay." Meanwhile, inside the Obadiah mansion, Amora's world was collapsing slowly. Her father's house felt like a golden cage. She barely spoke to anyone. The laughter of her friends felt fake. The clothes in her wardrobe felt heavy. Her engagement to Nonso was fixed quietly. Invitations were already being whispered about in Enugu's high circles. Chief Obadiah's daughter marrying a barrister's son. What a match! But in her heart, the match felt like a funeral. One night, she sat in her room scrolling through old messages on her phone, the ones she and Abuka had exchanged. She stopped on the line that said, "Every dream smells like smoke before it shines." She closed her eyes and whispered, "Then shine, Abuka. Shine where I can't reach you." As fate would have it, that same night, Abuka sat in his small room staring at a sketchbook that on its pages were designs, car engines, tools, and handwritten ideas that he had always dreamed of building something new, a machine that could run on hybrid fuel without wasting energy. He whispered to himself, "If no one will hire me, I'll build something they'll have to notice." But as he worked late into the night, the sound of his mother's coughing from the next room reminded him how fragile his world had become. He closed his sketchbook gently and murmured, "First, I must save her." 2 weeks later, his mother passed quietly in her sleep. Abuka sat beside her bed, holding her frail hand long after her last breath. Tears fell silently down his face. He buried her alone behind the house, with only 2 neighbors helping him dig. When the last soil covered her grave, he whispered, "Rest now, Mama. I'll make you proud, I promise." That night, he sat under the moonlight, staring at the stars through tears. His world had crumbled, his work, his love, his mother, all gone. He whispered, "Maybe this is what falling feels like." Meanwhile, Amora's wedding preparations continued without joy. Each dress fitting felt like punishment, each congratulatory call a blade. Her father noticed her silence but ignored it. He thought time would wash away her rebellion. But destiny had other plans. One afternoon, while Chief Obadiah was reviewing construction plans at his company, he received a call. "Sir," said a trembling voice on the line. "One of your trucks has failed its brake and caused an accident near NG Double Road." His face paled. "What?" "The mechanic responsible for inspection wasn't available. They said you dismissed him recently." Obadiah froze. "Which mechanic?" "Abuka, sir." The line went silent. He hung up slowly, his heart thudding. For the first time, he felt something unfamiliar, guilt. He looked out the window at the rain starting to fall and muttered, "What have I done?" That night, he sat in his study alone, staring at Amora's old photo with her mother. He whispered to himself, "Maybe I've been trying to protect her from pain, and in doing so, I became the pain." He closed his eyes, tears threatening to fall, but his pride caught them before they could drop. Somewhere across the city, Abuka packed his few belongings into a small bag. He looked once more at his mother's grave, then at the skyline of Enugu in the distance. "I'm leaving this city," he said softly. "But when I return, the world will know my name." And with that, he walked into the night, a broken man chasing an unbroken dream. The morning sun crept over Enugu's skyline, painting the red roofs gold. 3 years had passed since Abuka left the city. 3 years since his mother's burial, his humiliation, and the day Amora was forced into silence. Rumors said he had vanished. Others claimed he went mad chasing impossible dreams, but what no one knew was that he had been working in the shadows, turning his pain into invention. In a small industrial town outside Abuja, Abuka had joined a group of engineers at a training institute. He started as a cleaner, sleeping in the storeroom, listening quietly to every class through half-open doors. When no one was around, he'd fix broken machines the engineers left behind. His hands remembered what others had forgotten: patience, focus, and quiet genius. One evening, a visiting professor saw him repairing a fuel pump prototype. "Who taught you that?" the man asked, amazed. Abuka looked up shyly. "No one, sir. I just studied it." "Studied? You mean you figured this out without a degree?" Abuka smiled faintly. "Sir, I don't have paper, I have practice." The professor laughed softly. "What's your name?" "Abuka." "Well, Abuka, today the world will start learning yours." Months later, news began spreading across Nigeria's tech circles about a young self-taught inventor who designed a low-fuel hybrid engine capable of running on both petrol and waste oil. Journalists called it the people's engine. Government officials called it too good to be true. But Abuka called it Mama's promise. He named it after the vow he made beside his mother's grave, to build something that would lift people like her from struggle. Soon, investors came calling. Photos of his clean-cut face appeared on newspapers. "Young Nigerian engineer builds revolutionary engine." And among those who saw it, sitting in her father's mansion in Enugu, was Amora. It was a Saturday morning. The television played softly in the background. Amora sat half-dressed for a charity event, uninterested in the noise. Then she heard the news anchor say his name. The young innovator, Mr. Abuka Ease, unveiled his prototype today in Abuja. His creation is expected to revolutionize transportation across Africa. Her heart stopped. She turned slowly toward the TV. There he was, wearing a simple blue suit, speaking confidently at a conference. His voice was calm, deep, mature. Gone was the timid apprentice. In his place stood a man reborn by fire. She covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "Abuka," she whispered. Her father, who sat reading the newspaper nearby, looked up sharply. "Did you say Abuka?" Amora nodded slowly. Yes, Daddy. The mechanic you destroyed, he's alive. Chief Obadiah frowned, disbelief in his eyes. That's impossible. But the headline said it clearly. Inugu mechanic turned inventor wows world engineers. He folded the paper and walked quietly to his study. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of regret heavy on his chest. Days later, invitations went out for a technology exhibition in Inugu, sponsored by the state government. Among the guests of honor was Chief Obadiah, whose company handled the event's logistics. When he saw the name of the keynote presenter, Abuka Ease, founder, Mama's Promise Auto Tech, his heart skipped. He didn't tell Amora, but she found out anyway. And that night, she packed her bag quietly. The day of the exhibition arrived. The Michael Okra Square glittered with banners and flashing cameras. Business leaders, governors, and journalists gathered to see the young genius who had made Africa proud. Abuka walked onto the stage wearing a simple grey suit, humility in his steps but power in his eyes. Behind him stood his prototype engine, mounted on a small vehicle. He began calmly. 3 years ago, I was called a nobody, a boy whose hands were too dirty to touch a dream. But today, these same hands built something that runs clean. The crowd erupted in applause. Chief Obadiah sat near the front row, silent. Each word hit him like truth returning for justice. And to those, Abuka continued, who ever felt small because the world laughed at their background, remember, greatness is not where you start, but how far your courage can carry you. As the cheers grew, Amora stood at the edge of the crowd, tears sliding down her face. She had hidden under a scarf to avoid the cameras. When Abuka finished his presentation, reporters surrounded him. He smiled, shook hands, and answered questions, until one voice rose above the noise. Abuka! He turned, his eyes met hers. For a moment, the crowd disappeared. The years, the pain, the distance, all gone in one heartbeat. He took a step forward. She did too. When they met in the middle of the hall, Amora smiled through tears. You kept your promise, she whispered. So did you, he said softly. Their hands touched, simple, real, unashamed. Cameras flashed wildly. Chief Obadiah sat frozen, his pride melting into something he hadn't felt in a long time, humility. Later that evening, he waited alone in the VIP lounge while security cleared the hall. When Abuka and Amora entered, the old man stood up slowly. For a few seconds, silence filled the room. Then Chief Obadiah said, So, the mechanic boy became a man. Abuka bowed slightly. Good evening, sir. The chief sighed. I've watched men rise, and I've watched them fall. But I've never seen anyone rise this quietly. Abuka nodded humbly. Pain is a good teacher, sir. Obadiah's eyes softened. I gave you pain, didn't I? Abuka looked down. Yes, sir. But it also gave me strength. Amora held her breath, unsure what would happen next. Then her father did something no one in Inugu would have believed. He stepped forward and extended his hand. I was wrong, he said quietly. And I'm sorry. Abuka hesitated, then shook his hand firmly. The chief's voice trembled. I thought power was in wealth. But today, I saw a man who built his own without it. I don't just respect you, I bless you. Tears filled Amora's eyes. Her father turned to her and smiled faintly. You chose well, my daughter. Amora hugged him tightly for the first time in years. Thank you, Daddy. That night, the city of Inugu glittered brighter than usual. Fireworks lit the sky as Abuka's invention was announced as a national innovation winner. As the crowd celebrated, Abuka stood beside Amora on the balcony of the hotel, the wind brushing through their hair that he whispered, Do you still think I was strange? She laughed softly. You're still strange, but now you're my strange. He smiled. And you're still proud. She grinned. Maybe. But now, I'm proud of the right person. They both laughed, the sound carrying across the city like the echo of every pain they had survived. The rains had returned to Inugu, but this time they didn't bring sorrow, they brought cleansing. The streets glistened under the night lights, and the sound of thunder rolled softly like drums of celebration echoing across the hills. It had been 3 months since Abuka's invention changed everything. Mama's Promise Auto Tech now partnered with the state government to introduce eco-friendly engines across Nigeria. And tonight, the entire city buzzed for the grand opening of his new automobile plant, the first of its kind built entirely by local hands. The banners read, "Abuka Ease, from mechanic to miracle." But before the event began, the rain started, heavy and sudden. Booker stood by the window of his new office overlooking the plant, watching the storm. His thoughts wandered to one man, Chief Obadiah. Since the day of the exhibition, the chief had kept in touch, calling occasionally but never visiting. Booker respected the distance. He understood that some walls, though forgiven, take time to crumble. His phone buzzed suddenly. That it was Amora, her voice trembling. "Booker, it's Daddy." "What happened?" "He collapsed an hour ago. He's in the hospital. They said, his heart." Booker didn't wait another second. He grabbed his jacket and rushed into the storm. Rain battered his windshield as he sped through the streets. Every honk, every puddle, every flash of lightning seemed to chase him forward. At University of Nigeria Teaching Hospital, the corridors smelled of antiseptic and fear. Amora sat outside the ICU, her hair drenched, her face pale. When she saw him, she ran into his arms. "He was asking for you," she whispered through tears. "He said your name before he fainted." Booker's throat tightened. "Take me to him." They entered quietly. The room was dim. Machines beeped rhythmically beside the bed where Chief Obadiah lay, weak but awake, his breathing shallow. When his eyes opened and saw Booker, he tried to smile. "You came." Booker nodded. "You shouldn't be talking much, sir." Obadiah's voice cracked. "I've spent my life building things, but I destroyed more than I built." "You didn't destroy me, sir," Booker said softly. "You built me, just not the way you planned." The chief chuckled weakly, tears glistening in his eyes. "I thought I was protecting her. I was only protecting my pride." Amora held his hand tightly. "Daddy, please don't talk like this." He looked at her gently. "My daughter, you chose the kind of love I never understood. A love that doesn't look at pockets, only hearts." Then he turned to Booker again. "Promise me something, my son." Booker leaned closer. "Anything, sir. Take care of her. Not because you can afford her, but because you'll never take her for granted." Booker swallowed hard. "I promise." The chief smiled faintly. "Then you have my blessing." And with that, his eyes closed, not in death, but in peace. For the first time, the man who once ruled his world with fear rested in surrender. 2 weeks later, the skies over Enugu cleared. The city was alive again, filled with chatter about the wedding of the century, not between a billionaire's daughter and a barrister's son, but between a once poor mechanic and the woman who waited through storms. The event took place not in a cathedral or fancy hall, but in Booker's new plant, surrounded by the same workers who once laughed at him, the apprentices who now saw hope in their hands. When Amora walked down the aisle in a simple white dress, she smiled at the faces watching. Young girls who saw that love could cross class, young men who saw that humility could outshine wealth. Booker stood waiting, dressed in a clean white agbada, his hands steady, his heart loud. When she reached him, he whispered, "We made it." She smiled through tears. "No, love made it." As the officiant spoke, the sky opened slightly, a gentle rain falling, warm and soft, like heaven itself blessing their union. Booker lifted his gaze and whispered quietly, "No, we did it." And from somewhere in the rhythm of the rain, it almost felt like the world whispered back, "I told you pain was only a teacher." Months later, Mama's Promise Autotech expanded across West Africa. Booker created a scholarship fund in his mother's name to train young mechanics who couldn't afford school. On the wall of his office hung 2 photographs, his mother, smiling with grease on her cheek, and Chief Obadiah, standing beside him at the exhibition, the day he found redemption. Below the photos, an inscription read, "True wealth is not measured by what you own, but by what your hands build for others." At home, Amora often teased him, "You're still that boy who fixed my car, you know." And he would reply with a grin, "Yes, and I'll keep fixing your heart when it breaks, Madam Customer." They would laugh, and the house would fill with the warmth that only forgiveness can build. And so, the rich girl who fell in love with the mechanic taught the world a truth that money often forgets, that class may separate people, but character binds them forever. In the city of Enugu, Their story became a legend whispered to remind every dreamer, no status is too high and no struggle too low for love that is true. If you watch this story to the last, please subscribe and also watch the next amazing video by the right side.